The rise of domestic violent extremism is a serious and growing national security threat.
White supremacy is the biggest bucket of concern when it comes to domestic terrorism.
I think this is a big enough threat, an attack on the center of our democracy, that it's going to need a look that spans branches of government, something closer to a 9/11 commission.
The Biden administration will confront this threat with the necessary resources and resolve.
The leaders of the Democratic Party have now decided that 74 million Trump voters weren't just wrong or misguided. They didn't simply back the wrong guy or have incorrect opinions or fail to see the obvious truths. No, the threat they pose is graver and more serious than that, more dangerous. These 74 million Trump voters are, in fact, terrorists. They're a looming physical threat to the rest of us, and we must deal with them in the way that you deal with threats like that, existential threats to the nation. Saddam Hussein, al-Baghdadi, Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump's voters. For years, they told us this country had been infiltrated by Russian spies, but now we know it's worse than that. Just today, the Daily Beast, the homepage of our highly credentialed but not super bright ruling class, ran a piece with this title: "Can U.S. spy agencies stop white terror?" Other countries, the story pointed out, have domestic spy agencies to fight extremists at home. So, of course, we need one right away. What the piece does not mention is that those other countries would include China, North Korea, Kazakhstan. Domestic spy agency is a not very subtle euphemism for secret police. That is what they're calling for.
The members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
We don't have to guess about where this goes or how this ends when you have people like former CIA Director John Brennan openly talking about how he's spoken with or heard from appointees and nominees in the Biden administration who are already starting to look across our country for these types of movements similar to the insurgencies they've seen overseas, that in his words, he says, make up this unholy alliance of religious extremists, racists, bigots. He lists a few others and adds at the end, even libertarians.
Democrats in Congress support a new secret police agency, but why wouldn't they support it? What better way to protect your own power than funding a, quote, domestic spy agency to fight extremists at home? Those extremists, needless to say, will be their political opponents. So you don't have to worry about them anymore because they'll be in jail. Just last year, Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois sponsored legislation to begin the process of creating just such an agency, empowering current agencies to spy on Americans based on their political beliefs. And guess what? Schneider's bill sailed out of the House Judiciary Committee. All but 2 Republicans voted for it.
I heard a declaration of war against white supremacy and against the lies that brought our democracy to the brink. And President-elect Biden will inherit an unprecedented domestic security crisis.
A declaration of war against white supremacy. Now, you may not have noticed that because on one level, it's not very remarkable. Not many Americans support white supremacy. Most people in this country find it disgusting, of course, and they should. But the question is, what is it exactly? Now that we're waging war on white supremacists, can somebody tell us in very clear language what a white supremacist is?
What characteristics are we looking for as we're building this profile of a potential extremist? What are we talking about? Religious extremists? Are we talking about Christians, evangelical Christians? What is a religious extremist? Is it somebody who's pro-life? I mean, where do you take this? You start looking at, okay, well, obviously you have to be a white person. Obviously, likely male. Libertarians, well, if anybody who loves freedom, liberty, maybe has an American flag outside their house, or people who, attended a Trump rally. Once you start walking this down the path, you see where it leads to a very dangerous undermining of our civil liberties, our freedoms in our Constitution, and a targeting of almost half of the country.
I would make sure that we, in fact, focus on how to deal with the rise of white supremacy.
If confirmed, I will supervise the prosecution of white supremacists and others.
I know thousands of people. I go all over the nation. I don't know any white supremacists. I don't know. Maybe they're in the basement. There's vile stuff on the internet. Yes, the Proud Boys, a few hundred of them. The FBI is all over them, and they should be. Proud Boys aren't doing this country any good. But Antifa, Black Lives Matter, global organization, way more destructive.
So again, what is a white supremacist? You might be surprised to learn just how broad the definition for that has become. Bloomberg News has described a wall along our southern border as, quote, a monument to white supremacy, so be certain not to support that. Colin Kaepernick, who seems to have the unequivocal support of corporate America, calls the 4th of July an example of white supremacy. So you'd better put away the fireworks and the hot dogs. The United States Army, a trusted institution if there ever was one, has used an entire manual on what is and what is not white supremacy. So you should know this. Among the telltale signs of a committed white supremacist are these: celebrating Columbus Day, using the term American exceptionalism, any support for federal border security or English-only measures, or, quote, education funding from property taxes, all white supremacy. Using the phrase, there's only one human race, is white supremacy too, according to the Army. And of course, voting for Donald Trump, all white supremacy.
From Russian collusion, you go through all of the lies that the left and the Democrats and a lot of Republicans, too, have said over the past 5 years in an effort to damage Donald Trump, sabotage him. But look, it's really alarming what the Justice Department is doing. And for Merrick Garland today to repeatedly say that he is going to put yet another political partisan prosecution at the top of his priority list, overtaking the serious public safety concerns that most Americans have. A lot of his comments today were very alarming. This is another use of our Justice Department weaponized against political foes of the Beltway, but now they're targeting average Americans, holding them without bail in jail, and bankrupting people for misdemeanors.
A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat.
We will defeat political extremists, domestic terrorists, white supremacists. Those are America's enemies. We must wage war against them. We must, quote, defeat those people.
We are demonizing a class of people, 75 million Americans, if not more.
The thing that struck me so much about that John Brennan video is it would be one thing if they were saying, look, there's a band of people, 20 here, 50 over here, who wear swastika armbands, who still are in the KKK. There's maybe 2,000. We need to. That's not what they're saying. What he's saying is the exact opposite. Every group he lifted, even libertarians, it's essentially he's defining the insurgency as anyone who has an ideology other than neoliberalism. In other words, other than the ruling class view that is about to congeal and merge with the power of the state.
We are in a scary time. American freedoms are being obliterated under the name of politics, under the guise of installing equality, and they're stripping us of our American freedoms.
And what they're talking about explicitly, Tucker, is using the tools that they used to take ISIS off the internet, the tools that they used to destroy al-Qaeda. They're talking about it as a second war on terror. And that first war on terror, no matter what your views were originally at the beginning of 9/11, ended up eroding not civil liberties just elsewhere, but here at home as well. One that is born by name of being a domestic war on terror designed to essentially criminalize any oppositional ideology to the ruling class. There is literally nothing that could be more dangerous, and it's not fear-mongering or alarmism to say it. There are bills pending by Adam Schiff as well that would simply take the existing war on terror legislation always aimed at foreign governments and foreign actors and simply simply amend it to say we can now do that within the United States.
Thankfully, Sandy Cortez has been thinking about this for quite some time. Indeed, since she was a child growing up in leafy Westchester County. Some little girls played with dolls, but Sandy Cortez put her Barbies in a secure enclosure and re-educated them because they were thinking bad things, forbidden things. So Sandy Cortez knows exactly what to do now.
We had a program addressing white supremacists that we had programs, federal programs, that went towards funding organizations like these that de-radicalized people. And President Trump pulled the plug on federal funding for some of these programs. And so one thing that we know is that we have to get that funding right back up, and we probably need to double, triple, quadruple, or increase funding for these de-radicalization programs.
The totalitarian instinct is always the same, always. Only the names of the dictators change. First, you strip people of their right to speak out loud honestly. Then you prevent them from defending themselves and their families. And then, because you now can, you force them at gunpoint to read your catechism, to accept your orthodoxy. You wonder if Sandy Cortez plans to make Trump voters sign written statements affirming they have been deprogrammed. Of course, that's always part of the process.